Hello and welcome. You're watching BIZWORLD Weekly, a show where we bring you the top stories of the week from across the world. Let's start with the market check. Indian equity indices ended lower in a volatile session on August 29, with Nifty falling 0.3% at 24,426.85 and Sensex falling 0.34% at 79,809.65 points. Shriram Finance, ITC, Bharat Electronics, Trent and Asian Paints were among the top gainers on Nifty, while the top losers were M&M, Infosys, Apollo Hospitals, Adani Enterprises, Reliance Industries, and the BSE Mid-Cap Index shed 0.4% and Small Cap Index was down 0.3%. On sectoral front, metal, IT, realty, auto shed 0.5 to 1%, while capital goods, consumer durables, media, FMCG Index rose 0.2 to 1%. Indian rupee touched fresh record low of 88.31 before closing at 88.2 per dollar on August 29. From ye dosti hum nahi todenge to dost na raha to now we don't talk anymore like we used to do. India-US ties are fading. There is a conflict and US is acting like a toxic one in the relationship. After hitting India with a 50% tariff, US is now giving mixed signals. First, its trade advisor Peter Navarro says that Russia-Ukraine war is Modi's war. Then, its Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says that India and US will come together on one page. Conflicting statements are coming from the two sides. Some reports even suggest that India and US will resume trade talks soon. And why wouldn't they? US is more desperate now. As per a German newspaper's report, Modi refused 4 calls from Donald Trump in recent weeks ahead of the tariff deadline. Trump imposed these tariffs, saying that they are over Russia's relations and India-Russia relations and India's purchases of Russian oil. Then, alongside peace talks with Putin, his administration goes on to talk energy deals with Moscow. So the real reason may be to create panic in India, hit its economy and assume India would bow down to the US and open up its agriculture and dairy markets. But India stood firm on its stance. Any one-sided deal will not be agreed upon. India is confident and the government is now trying to turn this into an opportunity to bring reforms that will help the country grow in long term. It is diversifying its trade, accelerating trade talks with EU and Russia, and has signed an FTA with the UK. It is bringing in GST reforms, slashing GST rates to support MSMEs and accelerate domestic consumption to offset losses from these tariffs. But the situation does not look good for the Americans. Someone has to foot the bill for these high tariffs, and they are the American firms and the consumers. Tariff money might bring in a lot of revenue in federal coffers as per Trump, but American pockets will now feel the heat. In July, consumer prices rose 2.7% year-on-year. The Fed chairman says that tariffs are now starting to lift prices of heavily imported goods. As per Goldman Sachs economists, US consumers had absorbed 22% of tariff costs, but their share can be expected to raise to 67% by October. About 70% of the direct cost of tariffs will eventually fall on the consumers, and total could raise to 100% as per these economists. And this happens gradually because businesses already loaded up warehouses with pre-tariff goods, but once they are over, the American consumers will suffer. The tariffs will impact the Indian economy too, but the impact will not be as much if these steps that India is taking are successful. Meanwhile, reports have exposed Trump's double standards on tariffs. A report by Reuters suggests that behind the scenes of peace talks with Russia, Trump has been exploring energy deals with Moscow. The report goes on to give some details about the deal. It says that Trump's team discussed the possibility of ExxonMobil re-entering Russia's Sakhalin-1 oil and gas project. Sakhalin-1 is one of Russia's largest energy extraction sites. Now, the project earlier had American, Japanese, and Indian participation before the sanctions were forced. Then Exxon and other players had to move out. The same report also suggests that Trump's administration pitched a sale of US equipment for gas extraction at sanctioned projects like Arctic LNG too. So the double standards are clear. The tariffs also are one-sided. While the Trump administration hit industries like textile and apparel, gems and jewelry, shrimp, furniture, carpet, and more, they exempted pharma, electronics, and auto because that would hit American firms like Apple and even the consumers worst. Still, a GTRI report predicts that India's overall exports, goods and services will still grow to nearly $840 billion by FY26. Services exports are expected to jump 10% and non-US goods exports by 5%. For American companies, India is a huge market and boycott calls from across the country are echoing. US brands like Meta's WhatsApp, Domino's, Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, and Apple have a huge footprint in India. But rising buy local, ditch American sentiment is growing fast. So as bad as it is for India, US is also going to face the brunt, and it is going to be economically straining for American companies and consumers as well. So a deal is what Trump would desperately need now, and we'll see what happens in that front. It is a huge problem when you think that the entire world is scared of you, and that's one of the many problems that Trump has. This week, President Donald Trump has once again raised the stakes in the ongoing trade tensions with China, warning that the United States may impose punitive tariffs as high as 200% on Chinese imports if Beijing's restrictions on rare earth exports to the US come in again. Speaking to the reporters after a meeting with South Korean President Lee Jae-myung, Trump made clear that the magnets are critical leverage point in trade negotiations. He said this: "Now, rare earth magnets are vital components used across many of US's high-tech industries, including automotive, electronics, and renewable energy sectors. China currently holds a dominant position in the market, controlling around 90% of the global production and processing capacity for these minerals, giving Beijing a significant bargaining power." Now, Trump has also highlighted a key US countermeasure. He said that 200 Chinese airplanes were grounded because the US withheld Boeing parts to pressure China over magnet exports. Boeing is reportedly in talks to sell as many as 500 aircrafts to China, underscoring the strategic importance of aerospace in these trade discussions. Recent government data shows a massive rebound in China's rare earth magnet shipments to the US, with exports surging by 660% in June compared to the previous month and continuing to rise in July. However, Chinese analysts have characterized Trump's tariff threats as a bluff designed to apply pressure while signaling openness to trade cooperation. Henry Wang, the president of Beijing-based Center for China and Globalization, said that Trump's remarks are big talk and cautioned against getting caught up in these tricks, emphasizing that real progress will depend on both sides' commitment to their agreements. Currently, fragile trade truce is in place between the two nations, which eased controls on Chinese rare earth exports and rolled back some American tech restrictions as well. Now, this agreement, including tariff restrictions down to approximately 55% in US and 32% in China, is set to expire in mid-November. Meanwhile, Trump is threatening every country that has trade relations with Russia. So we'll see how that goes with China and Trump. Trump's ties with India is loosening, and with Pakistan, America is acting like besties. Maybe because of the Nobel Prize nomination or because of the alleged massive oil reserves that Trump has magically found in Pakistan. Now, American companies are lining up to dig these massive oil reserves and cash in out of them. But do they really exist? If yes, why have so many foreign firms left Pakistan? Here's a report.
American energy giants are beginning to circle Pakistan after Donald Trump's recent claims about the country's untapped oil reserves. U.S. firms are reportedly showing strong interest in exploration opportunities, sparking debate over whether Pakistan could be sitting on a game-changing energy treasure. This surge of interest follows Trump's announcement in late July, where he declared a new U.S.-Pakistan energy partnership. He framed it as a bold plan to help Pakistan unlock its so-called massive oil reserves, and even suggested that one day, Pakistan might export oil to India. The statement came on the heels of a landmark U.S.-Pakistan trade deal, which reduced tariffs, expanded market access, and crucially, set the stage for closer cooperation in the energy sector. But just how massive are these reserves? Estimates vary widely. Back in 2015, the U.S. Energy Information Administration suggested Pakistan could hold over 9 billion barrels of shale oil. Later studies painted a much smaller picture, some pegging recoverable reserves at just a few 100 million barrels. Pakistan ranks 52nd on the list of countries with petroleum in the world. It is just 0.021% of the global oil reserves. At the current consumption rate, Pakistan wouldn't last 2 years without oil imports, with this reserve Trump is calling massive. In fact, India has more. It is the world's third largest consumer of crude oil and has around 4.9 billion barrels of oil reserves, ranking among the top 25 globally. Despite the uncertainty, what's undeniable is Pakistan's heavy dependence on imports. The country spends more than $11 billion each year on foreign oil, a fifth of its total import bill, making domestic exploration a matter of economic survival. In fact, Pakistan survives on smuggled oil from Iran. Nearly $1.02 billion worth of Iranian petrol and diesel was illegally transported into Pakistan in 2023, as per reports. It makes up about 14% of Pakistan's annual fuel consumption. Pakistan is set to receive its first ever shipment of U.S. crude oil this October, about 1 million barrels, under deals with Synergico and Vitol. American companies, encouraged by Trump's push, are said to be studying exploration prospects in the lower Indus Basin and beyond. For Pakistan, such investment could mean fresh capital, technology transfers, and a chance to ease its chronic energy crisis. Yet, obstacles loom large. Exploration in Pakistan has historically been hindered by security risks, particularly in resource-rich Baluchistan, along with bureaucratic red tape and weak infrastructure. In recent years, several major international firms have exited Pakistan. Kuwait Petroleum began pulling out after over 40 years. Total Energies sold its fuel business stake, and Shell left in 2023 after 75 years. Energy experts warn that Trump's big claims may be more political theater than geological reality.
The world's balance of economic power is shifting, and the numbers are stunning. BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, and China have just overtaken the leading Western economies of the G7 in terms of combined GDP. Even more striking is that BRICS economies are growing much faster than their G7 peers. Measured by purchasing power parity or PPP, the combined GDP of the 4 largest BRICS countries now stand at $64.7 trillion, eclipsing the $43.9 trillion of the G7's top 4, the US, Germany, France, and Britain. Here's the breakdown. China at $37.1 trillion, India at $16 trillion, Russia at $6.9 trillion, Brazil at $4.7 trillion, and that is $64.7 trillion for BRICS. Compare it to G7. US at $29.2 trillion, Germany at $6 trillion, France at $4.4 trillion, and Britain at $4.3 trillion. And that's not just about the size, it's about the pace of growth that tells another story. Britain's GDP is rising at just 0.9%, Germany at 0.3%, France at 0.5%, and the US about 2%. In stark contrast, India is growing at 6.5%, China at 4.8%, Russia at 3%, and Brazil at 3.4%. The average annual growth in BRICS is 4.4%, 4 times faster than G7's 1%. The gap is widening, powering a global shift towards the so-called global south. As late as 1700, China and India accounted for more than the half of world's economic output. Centuries of colonialism reversed that trend, but the wheel is now turning again. Today, China and India already command over a third of total global GDP, and projections suggest that by 2050, they could reclaim a combined 50%, restoring their historic global economic dominance. With Prime Minister Narendra Modi attending the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit alongside China's President Xi Jinping and Russia's President Vladimir Putin, all eyes are on the new dynamics now. Washington and Western powers are watching closely for signs of deeper China-India-Russia alignment, which could further challenge the old balance of power. For India, relations with the West are complicated. History has seen US and allies as patrons but also as rivals and critics. US President Donald Trump has repeatedly warned that BRICS poses a direct threat to the dominance of the US dollar in global trade, issuing aggressive tariff threats as a part of his effort to maintain US economic supremacy. But why does Trump view BRICS as such a big threat? The answer lies in the US dollar's role as the world's dominant reserve currency. It underpins global finance, trade, and US geopolitical power. BRICS countries have been pushing to reduce the reliance on the US dollar by expanding trade using local currencies and exploring alternatives to the SWIFT international payment system. Trump describes losing the dollar's global standard status as same as losing a major war, warning that maintaining dollar supremacy is key to America's identity and global influence. But looks like the greatest G7 alliance is not as great anymore, with BRICS challenging it economically and geopolitically. And ironically, Trump's policies are only making BRICS closer and powerful. A major change affecting American consumers and global e-commerce has taken effect. President Donald Trump had signed an executive order ending the de minimis exemption, a long-standing trade rule that allowed low-value imports valued at $800 or less to enter the US duty-free. Under the new rule, effective August 29, 2025, all imported goods, regardless of their value, will face tariffs based on their country of origin. This move aims to close a trade loophole that experts say has been exploited by criminal networks to smuggle illicit substances and counterfeit goods into the US. Now, the de minimis rule was originally intended to streamline customs processing for small shipments, making it cheaper and easier for consumers to buy goods online from overseas sellers. But critics argue that this exemption allowed unfair competition, undercutting American manufacturers and exposing consumers to unsafe products. With the end of this exemption, now consumers, especially lower-income buyers who rely on affordable imports, are expected to face higher prices and slower delivery times. E-commerce giants like Amazon, Shein, and Alibaba, which have thrived under the previous rule, will now encounter increased costs and logistical hurdles. In response to the new tariffs, postal services in at least 25 countries have temporarily suspended or limited deliveries to the United States. These include major nations across Europe and Asia Pacific, such as the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, Belgium, Netherlands, Spain, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, Ireland, Austria, Switzerland, Poland, Czech Republic, and Australia, New Zealand, Japan, India, South Korea, Taiwan, and many other countries like Singapore and Canada too. This suspension affects parcels above certain values, while letters, documents, and gifts under $100 continue to be delivered. Postal operators are pausing shipments to avoid unexpected costs and to adapt their systems to the new customs and tariff requirements. Additionally, new fixed duties will apply even to shipments sent through the international postal networks, with fees ranging from $80 to $200 per item, depending on the tariff rates tied to their country of origin. This sweeping change is a part of the administration's broader effort to combat fentanyl trafficking and illegal imports, citing national security concerns and trade imbalances. As the rule kicks in, postal and shipping services worldwide are now suspending shipments to the US, preparing for a more complex customs environment. In short, while the intended tariffs are to protect American industries and security, Trump's de minimis order is set to reshape how everyday Americans shop online, making imported goods more expensive and cutting into the ease and affordability of cross-border e-commerce. Now, this is another tariff by the Trump administration that burns a hole in the pockets of an American consumer. Russia has unleashed its second largest aerial strike on Ukraine since the start of the war, devastating Kyiv and rattling already fragile hopes of peace. In the early hours of August 28, the capital was pounded by an unprecedented barrage, more than 600 missiles and drones, including hypersonic and ballistic weapons. Explosions tore through over 20 sites across the city, destroying apartment blocks, damaging government buildings, and even striking the offices of European Union and British Council. At least 21 people, including 4 children, were killed and dozens more were injured as rescue workers scrambled through the debris. Now, Moscow's defense ministry insisted that the assault targeted military installations, but the scale of civilian damage told a very different story. What makes this escalation even more striking is the timing. Just 2 weeks earlier, US President Donald Trump had hosted Putin in Alaska for what was billed as a breakthrough in peace talks. Trump hailed the summit as a success, suggesting that Moscow was ready to engage in dialogue and that the path of ending the war was within reach. But the devastation in Kyiv has raised serious doubts about those claims. The global reaction to the attack was immediate and fierce. In London and Brussels, Russian ambassadors were summoned as Western leaders condemned the assault as an affront to diplomacy itself. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer accused Putin of deliberately sabotaging peace efforts, while French President Emmanuel Macron described the strike as terror and barbarism. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen also pushed for higher sanctions, warning that Europe would not let such aggression stand. Across the Atlantic, Washington responded with a dual strategy. The Trump administration announced an $825 million military aid package for Kyiv, even as officials insisted that they would keep pressing for a negotiated statement. Yet, the question remains, is peace even possible under these conditions? The Kremlin continues to insist that it is open to talks, but the spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, has dismissed the idea of an immediate ceasefire as unrealistic. Earlier this year, the London summit railed a coalition of the willing to offer security guarantees for Ukraine, but Russia has flatly rejected any framework involving NATO or EU troops. That leaves diplomacy stuck in a limbo, with Moscow escalating on the battlefield while professing interest in negotiations. 2 weeks after Alaska, the so-called breakthrough has given way to bloodshed, raising a sobering question. Was peace even really on the table, or was it always just another battlefield tactic? After taking a 10% stake in Intel, Trump administration has signaled buying stakes in defense companies too. Now, it's not unusual for governments to take stakes in private companies, but it only happens during an economic crisis or downfall. Well, Trump's tariff policies might be an economic blunder, as economists are putting it, but it is not led to a recession yet. So why does the administration want stake in these companies? Here's a report.
Donald Trump is pushing for something unprecedented in modern U.S. defense policy: government equity stakes in companies like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and Palantir. If it happens, it would transform the relationship between Washington and the defense industry, reshaping markets, oversight, and even the free market system itself. So, what's behind the push? First, Trump and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick argue that taxpayers already fund these companies. Lockheed Martin, for example, receives nearly 97% of its revenue from U.S. government contracts. If taxpayers are footing the bill, the White House says they should also share in the profits and decision-making, not just act as a customer. Second, it's about leverage and control. By owning a stake, the government would literally have a seat at the table, ensuring company strategy aligns with U.S. national security priorities. Whether it's ramping up arms production for Ukraine or preparing for a Taiwan contingency. Third, Trump frames it as a matter of returns and accountability. Equity stakes could deliver dividends, voting rights, and more oversight, helping claw back value for taxpayers and keeping costs in check. And finally, there's historical precedent. During World War II, in the 2008 bailouts, and even with the recent Intel deal, Washington has taken equity positions before. But here's the key difference: the defense industry isn't failing. This move would be about influence and profit, not rescue. But if it goes forward, the consequences would be enormous. Corporate governance would change overnight. The Pentagon wouldn't just be the biggest customer, it would also be a shareholder, raising tough questions about oversight, accountability, and conflicts of interest. The free market itself could be reshaped. With the government sitting inside boardrooms, competitors might fear unfair favoritism and reduced innovation. Critics warn of risks. With government on both sides of the transaction, cost overruns and inefficiencies might go unchecked. Plus, Washington could be dragged into corporate scandals or strategic missteps in ways it hasn't before. Markets are already reacting. Defense stocks have swung on the news, and globally, allies and rivals alike are watching closely. In short, Trump's plan is about leverage, profit, and control. But if the U.S. government buys into defense companies, it could fundamentally alter the defense industrial landscape, for better or worse.
Turkey has unveiled its most ambitious defense project yet, the Steel Dome. Hailed by the president as a watershed moment, this $460 million integrated air defense system is designed to transform both Turkey's military capabilities and its standing in global arms industry. So what exactly is the Steel Dome? Developed domestically, it's Turkey's first indigenous integrated air defense network, and the first phase alone saw the delivery of 47 vehicles, including radars, anti-aircraft batteries, electronic warfare equipment, and command programs to the armed forces. It's a multi-layered system combining short-range missile and cannon defenses against drones and rockets, medium-range batteries for aircraft, and new Super interceptor for long-range high altitude threats. Though its range is about 200 kilometers at best, it is still evolving. At full strength, Steel Dome will use AI-enabled sensors and command centers for rapid threat detection and real-time response. The president says that this marks a new era for Turkish defense, a shift pushed by regional instability and recent conflicts and barriers to the Western defense imports. Turkey is betting on becoming both self-sufficient and a global exporter with new production bases and next-generation technologies like lasers already in the pipeline. But how does this Steel Dome compare to Israel's celebrated Iron Dome? Israel's Iron Dome, operational since 2011, is world-renowned for its 90% plus interception rate against short-range rockets and has seen extensive combat use. Israel integrates it with David Sling and Arrow systems, building a dense multi-tiered shield even covering atmospheric missile threats. Turkey's Steel Dome, by contrast, aims to similar short, medium and long-range protection but cannot yet intercept very long-range or exo-atmospheric ballistic missiles. And unlike Israel's combat-proven Iron Dome, Steel Dome is still in early stages and untested in real battle. So is Steel Dome a true rival to Iron Dome? Not yet. It lacks the battlefield record and ultra-long range coverage, and Turkey faces the huge challenge of trying to protect a territory much larger than Israel's. Analysts estimate full coverage may not be achieved until 2030. Still, this is a major leap for Turkey, showcasing domestic innovation and signaling its arrival as a serious global defense player. Until Turkey's Steel Dome proves itself in real-world combat, comparisons to Israel's Iron Dome will remain aspirational, but its launch marks a new chapter, both for Turkish military power and for the global air defense market. Let's see how that goes. It's a big weekend for the world and global alliances. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is on a crucial 4-day trip. The first stop is Japan, and the second stop is the one that is grabbing eyeballs from across the world. Prime Minister Narendra Modi of India will be attending the Shanghai Cooperation Summit in China. He will be visiting China after 7 long years from August 31st to September 1st. Now, this trip is short, but the timing is crucial. Trump has imposed China-like tariffs on India. China, Russia and India are now kind of in a same boat tariff-wise. Trump this week even threatened China with a 200% tariff if rare earth exports stop. So what's on the agenda on Prime Minister Modi's 4-day trip to Japan and China? Let's start with Japan. The countries have stepped up their economic partnership with wide-ranging MOUs pledging more than $13 billion in investments across industries, clean energy and human resource exchange. In the past 2 years, Japanese firms have signed over 170 MOUs with India. Nippon Steel committed a 7,100 crore rupees for projects in Gujarat and Andhra Pradesh. Suzuki is investing 38,200 crore rupees in expanding the Gujarat base. Toyota has announced 23,300 crore rupees for new and expanded facilities and more. The agreements are also opening up new avenues for Indian MSMEs like collaborations of Tokyo Electron and Fujifilm with Tata Electronics in semiconductors and Toyota Suzuki supply chain integration, bringing hundreds of Tier 2 and Tier 3 Indian suppliers into a global network. Hiring is also happening with Fujitsu hiring 9,000 Indian engineers. Rural economy is also expanding with clean energy firms setting up plants. Japan-backed ventures will also expand India's role as export hub as Nippon Steel is producing specialty steel for global markets in India. Toyota and Suzuki are planning to export cars to Africa and Southeast Asia from India and more. Coming to the next leg of the trip and the most crucial one, Modi's trip to China. Modi will be visiting, and this is seen as a key to normalizing relations between India and China. Modi is set to hold bilateral talks with Xi Jinping on sidelines of SCO summit. He will also be meeting Putin in China. So it will be a India-China-Russia meeting, which Russia had called for a long time now. As per some reports, Chinese President Xi Jinping wrote a secret letter to his Indian counterpart in March that led to speeding up of improvement of relationship between the two countries that now face a common challenge, Donald Trump. Now, the letter had been then passed on to Prime Minister Modi as per the report. As per the report, it also says that in June, India had reciprocated to Xi Jinping's outreach in a serious manner. So it looks like now both sides want to mend ties and stand strong against the tariff bully Trump. Russia wants to counterbalance US influence on the other hand, and so India-Russia-China alliance would help is what it is thinking. Both Russia and China have signaled to interest in a trilateral. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson in July said that China-India-Russia cooperation not only serves the respective interests of the three countries but also helps uphold peace, security, stability and progress in the region and the world. The three nations are also nuclear powers, and the three command a $53.9 trillion GDP in PPP terms, a third of the world's economic output, $5.09 trillion in merchandise exports, 3.1 billion people, 4.7 trillion in forex reserves, the largest consumer market in human history, a combined military spend of $549 billion. That's 20.2% of global defense budgets, and not to mention 35% of global energy consumption. The three are also a part of BRICS, which Trump says is a threat to the US dollar. But ironically, the three are meeting because of Trump's aggressive tariff hit on India. So the world will be watching this meeting closely, and so will we. We will bring you the latest updates so you don't miss out. Stay tuned to ET Now for more such news and views.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.